YouTube, what the crap's going on? Heir of Carthage here, back in Total War Rome 2. And after that fun discussion we had yesterday about Iberian swordsmen and how they can kind of double as peltasts, it's like, hey, Carthage has Iberian swordsmen, and they have Libyan peltasts, which are like heavy skirmishers. Now, their javelins are different than the ones carried by the swordsmen, but still very handy unit. They're quite heavy, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to build a somewhat similar army with Carthage, except I am actually going to bring a couple of units of cavalry just to have some mobility if it's needed. My main line will be hoplites, just because they're very well armored. So if my opponent does want to expend a bunch of javelins or bring chariots or heavy cav, like I've got a slightly more stable core than I would as the Lusitani, but I'm still going to back them up with all the javelin power, the 480 javelin men, basically, that are the mercenary Iberians. And if, let's pause it real quick, and if you take a look at these javelins, these are clearly a special type of javelin. I don't know if it affects their damage or anything, but I think they're going to be pretty damaging. If you look at it, it's kind of a long, slender javelin, as opposed to you normally get this kind of look, the kind of heavy, you know, with a much bigger, blunt tip type javelin that you're going to see on these guys here. Something like that. So if anybody understands what the difference is in the game, like the weapon types, that may be something I need to ask CA about, just kind of see what they do. But anyway, so my army: 4 late Carthaginian hoplites, 2 late Libyan hoplites, 2 mercenary noble fighters. This is going to be the killing power, hopefully, of my army, along with the Samnite warrior again. So killing power is right here, staying power, you know, flexibility with the hoplites, and then the late Carthaginian or late Libyan hoplites are going to be my cav support. Flank units, basically. And then I'm keeping my Iberian swordsmen in the back, and I will throw them into a melee fight if I have to, but really, I want the javelins on these guys. They're going to act like flexible peltasts for me. And my Pontic opponent here has a similar idea to my army, to be honest. He's got 2 levy pikemen holding his flanks, which is kind of a weird choice, but his center is 4 Thurio spears, in front of which he has mercenary Celtic warriors, which also have javelins, and then behind them are 3 Pontic peltasts, which also have a lot of javelins. And then he's brought scythe chariots, and then some heavy cav, 2 noble blood cav, 2 Pontic royal cav. So essentially these Celtic guys are throwaway units, while the spears get thrown from the Thurio spears and the Pontic peltast, and then he's got his slingers for a long range asset. And then he's thinking, hey, I've got a heavy cav, my pikes will kind of hold people off the flank. I've actually seen this type of army before. It wasn't exactly the same, but this is pretty similar to what annihilated me when I chose the Thracians. Last time, the Odrysian Kingdom. And I was actually really hoping my opponent would bring chariots and heavy cav, because I wanted to demonstrate to you all. Some of you have made the comments like, oh, well, chariots would still wreck the Lusitani. Potentially, yes, but I don't think so. And it's because, remember, when we did that unit testing against the chariots a while back, that we discovered that javelins were actually the most effective missiles versus chariots. So, and especially when you have this case, so normally these guys hurl a certain type of javelin and there's only 90 men, but I've noticed that you get 120 men per unit here with the mercenary Iberian swordsmen, and they hurl this nice long-range javelin that they have, so it's pretty handy. The one thing you got to be careful of is you can click missile attack orders for these guys, but sometimes they'll get blobbed up and you got to be careful about that. So let's see what I do. I'm going to use my Libyan peltast to screen. If my opponent wants to charge me with his cavalry, it's fine. Utterly unconcerned with it. These are pretty heavy peltasts. So if that's what he feels like he wants to do, he can. But yeah, check it out. Thurio spears, start hurling javelins. So again, this is the plan. You charge his cheap units while he's getting good shots on you with his Thurio spears. But I have my screening peltast up here, and they're going to absorb the javelins from all of his men, and then I'm just going to retreat them, come straight through with my late Carthaginian hoplites, and tank out these mercenary Celtic warriors. And I'm going to let him throw all of his javelins at my hoplites, who are number 1, engaged in combat, and number 2, very well armored and shielded. And then I'm going to pull my elite units, my elite sword units, or at least these 2, back. Unfortunately, this mercenary noble fighter gets left in front. I didn't quite get my hoplites the orders I wanted. So anyway, you can see his guys fall apart, and he's got to move up his Thurio spears a little closer. But that's okay. He's got a 3rd line here of javelins. That's his Pontic peltast. So again, you can see his idea is just to unload wave after wave of javelins at me. The thing is he's using all his javelins on my heaviest infantry. And then over here, I'm going to use a little tactic. I'm going to pin his chariots with my Carthaginian cav, at least try and just stop them. And apparently I've got them stopped for the moment, and I chase his noble blood cav off with my hoplites, and then I'm going to bring in my swordsmen to hurl their javelins. But again, I click the blob attack order, so I don't get as many javelins off as I could if I would have kept my guys spread out. So when you bunch your guys up, they don't have room to throw, and it slows them down. So I only get a few javelins off at his scythe chariots here, but still, they're sitting still, and javelins are quite good against chariots, so it's going to cause a little damage. All the while, my opponent's having to swing all the way around my flank, and then in the meantime, I've caused a lot of damage to his infantry. So you can see this mercenary noble fighter tore through the Celtic guys, and now they're working on this Thurio spear. His guys are going to start running lower on javelins now. They still have some, so it's not over yet. And these mercenary noble fighters are going to have to come under heavy fire to get to their target, unfortunately. But then I've got these mercenary Samnite warriors, and I'm going to put them in a blocky formation and push through this gap in his line because my opponent left gaps. And again, you can see that I got enough javelins on his chariots and then chased them with my cav to where they actually died and routed. And they've only got 36 kills, which would probably be against my cavalry here. So my opponent gets rid of one of my cav units, but I kill most of his scythe chariot unit before it gets any meaningful kills. And then you're just going to see me protect these sword javelin men with my hoplites here. And the idea is that if my opponent approaches, I'll just hurl javelins over my lines and destroy his cavalry. And then I've got this cavalry here still for mobility, and then I've got these Pontic Peltis killing this regrouped unit of mercenary Celtic, while my big-time swordsmen get in here and start taking care of business. Now again, his guys do have a little bit of ammo left, but these Samnite warriors got through and got to his Pontic Peltist. I've got an Eastern Slinger and a Pontic Peltist, and then you can see here that I was trying to get into his pikemen while they were moving into formation, and it looks like I succeed, actually. I should have left my guys in that fight. I end up pulling him back, though, and I'm going to try and take him here into the back of this Thurio spear so I can defeat it more quickly. So I'm just going to avoid his pikemen. So I pulled my general out and around, kept this cavalry here for now just in case I need it. And I'm going to take my general and pin down the rest of these skirmishers because my infantry's winning the fight. The Pontic player really didn't want to end up in an infantry fight with these type of units. And you can see I was able to use the headhunt here and just chew on through. And then now I'm going to be able to engage these Peltists and pin them down. So he did cause a lot of damage to my infantry, but that's the thing, is I have a whole bunch more. So again, my opponent brought all this cavalry, which does have nice potential killing power, but he's not able to use it. And I'm basically able to just keep him busy elsewhere on the battlefield because he's worried about all these other units that I have, while I sit here and gain an upper hand over in this at this point. And then he has to bring his cav all the way back around if he wants to do it. And again, check it out here. He brings his chariots up within range of my javelins. Boom, gonna unload on him with the Iberian swords. I already knocked down another chariot, and then get some more shots off, and these guys are gonna be going bye-bye. So his chariots just get destroyed by my Iberian swordsmen. So again, for those of you who think that chariots are the bane of the Lusitani, not necessarily, because again, javelins are quite good. And here at his Pontic Cav, again, Iberian swordsmen, not so great in and of themselves at taking out Pontic Cav, but with their javelins, they all of a sudden become pretty good at taking out Pontic Royal Cavs, so check that out. So you're not going to see a ton of kills on these Iberian swordsmen. Remember that most of their kills are Royal Cav and chariots. And you don't get extra kills for killing a chariot because it just counts as one, unfortunately. So yeah, my tanky infantry is still over here tanking it out, even though they got rear charged because I popped Headhunt, and it'll make these guys temporarily unbreakable. And then my general supported them with the raised banner as well. So yeah, the enemy general was getting caught up with some of my hoplites and Carthaginian cav. Anyway, his last blob of men here, and check out these Eastern Slingers still doing a bang-up job shooting in the back of my Samnite warriors. All the while, I'm just overwhelming his men over here, and there's nothing he can do about it. So he's committing all of his forces here to try and rout these troops, but you can't rout a unit in Headhunt with 353 morale. That just won't happen. You can kill them, but you're not going to rout them. Now my guys might rout, but that's after 271 kills. And now the rest of your units are pinned in by my cav over here and my Samnite warriors here. These guys are hard to break because of their 95 armor. And then you can see my general actually has gotten nearly 100 kills just from killing enemy skirmishers. So at this point, the merits of this infantry-heavy, javelin-heavy type build seems real. Now, granted, my opponent didn't play as good as he could, but I mean, the Pontic build that he brought is actually pretty viable because it's based on the same essential strategy that I did here. He's got heavy cavalry for killing light units or, dominating enemy cav, and he's got a ton of javelins for mopping up anything that's light enough to get killed by them. So it's interesting that javelins weren't really on the forefront of anybody's mind in this patch, I don't think. In fact, a lot of people are like, oh, well, javelins are worthless now. They don't do a ton of damage to infantry. But we didn't know that there's all these little gems of knowledge out there, like, for instance, Thurio spears, until someone realized, like, wow, these guys have great range and a bunch of javelins. And then someone realized, oh, man, it's the same way with the Iberian swordsman. And all of a sudden, it's going to change the way that people have to look at these games. So I think this makes Carthage even more flexible as a faction now, and I'll tell you why. So let's go take a look at them. You can see the results on this screen. Some of my units doing very well here. If we take a look at some of my favorite numbers, 272 enemies killed here before they went down. Very nice. I don't know if it paid for itself because some of the units I killed were cheap, but still cool to see. This Mercenary Samnite Warrior did excellent. So really impressed there. My Libyan Peltas doing a good job. Hardly any of them died and got me a bunch of kills. My General's Bodyguard getting 111 kills. That's great. My enemy's chariots were just worthless here. They just couldn't get the job done, and neither could his cav. His Pontic Peltist, again, right idea. These guys got quite a few kills, but you kill that many, and most of them were late Carthaginian hoplites. It's kind of tough to say whether or not it paid for itself in the end. And again, Thurio spears getting a respectable number of kills, mostly from the javelins. So you can see the merits of the decision for his army. It's just that I had kind of one-upped him, I think, on kind of the creative army builds there. So I liked the way he was thinking. It just ended up working out better for me in this case. Cavalry is still good in this game, and it's still dangerous. Just because you bring what I bring, don't think it's going to make you invulnerable to cavalry. It'll just make your opponent have to be a little better with his micro and a little more careful about how he engages that cavalry in order to be successful. And how do you deal with those big bunches of Iberian swordsmen like I brought that are hurling javelins at you? Well, you need long-range skirmishers. They're very vulnerable to long-range skirmishers. And so that's the whole reason why I brought my Pontic Peltist. I brought my Pontic Peltist to push back long-range skirmishers and to keep them away from my Iberian swordsmen and to screen for my infantry. I wasn't intending to ever get into a long-range skirmish fight with my opponent there. It was meant to be just more of a pushback maneuver. So anyway, Carthage, very flexible faction, and I really like the unit selection they get right now. Iberian swords, great unit because of those javelins. Also excellent in a rear charge. Mercenary Gallic warriors, also a pretty sturdy, nice unit for the price. Mercenary Italian swordsman, it's kind of like a little cheap Hastati unit, not quite as good, but same idea, interesting unit. Mercenary Scutari, not a bad unit on the charge. Libyan infantry, pretty powerful sword unit. Samnite warriors, real tanky sword unit. Mercenary noble fighters, kind of like an Oathsworn in some ways. And then these late Libyan hoplites, fantastic with the 30 bonus versus cavalry and an 80 armor. That makes these guys really hard for like horse archers to pick at, or javelin cav, they can use them to screen them off. Very useful unit. Late Carthaginian hoplites, great mainline unit. They can hold off against swords for a good while even if they're not going to win. They've got pikes, so it gives them that flexibility. They've got heavy javelins. They've got mercenary Balearic slingers, Cretan archers. They don't have good shot cavalry. That's going to be the big drawback to Carthage. But when it comes to melee cav, nice options here with the Carthaginian cav and mercenary Scutari with the option for elite Campanian cav. And then these light Iberian cav are fantastic for mocking up skirmishers. Just great unit for that. And then the mercenary Numidian noble cav is also fantastic. And then they've got elephants. So really, when you look at Carthage, they have an extremely well-rounded roster, and there's a lot of potential army builds with them. Are they going to be the #1 faction in the game? No, I don't think so. And there's certain things that are still going to be challenging for them, but I think it gives you a ton of flexibility. And I think that that's important right now with your army builds. Think flexible. And, I would have never thought that this infantry-heavy build that I brought right there would be worthwhile, but it's actually a pretty decent build. And it can counter a lot of things because of the versatility of the javelins that come off of these Iberian swords. They can kind of hold their own against cheap flanking units in a melee fight, but they can also hurl a lot of javelins at cavalry. I'm pretty sure javelins have a bonus versus large, which is why they work out so nice versus elephants and chariots as well. These guys are elephant and chariot killers. Don't underestimate them. And if you're using elephants or chariots, make sure that you keep these guys busy before you bring those units in, or else they will massacre you. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this one. Heir of Carthage signing off for now.